Coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. And thank you for joining me. And we will have a lovely conversation today. And if you wish to join that conversation, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question or introduce a subject, you can do that on any platform you may happen to be watching on, and it will show up in my chat room here in my broadcast center. And hello to Michael in the chat room. It's good to see you. Um, we, in theory, do this every day. Some days I'm not available. I was not available yesterday, but generally we're here every day. We also have interviews, sometimes generally pre-recorded interviews or live chat like today. Um, as you probably know, I am in the process of preparing to move. You can kind of see the wreckage of that in the background. And as I do that, um, we may expand the scope of this show somewhat. But at present, it's basically just me talking with you, and I think that's a nice format. Hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you. I quite enjoy these conversations. Sometimes they just sort of ramble. Other times they're more focused. I also enjoy bringing you interviews, both present and past. And we will see where it all goes. I am hoping this broadcast continues and, again, expands in a variety of ways as we go forward. I'm also, once I've completed my move, I'm looking to expand my Patreon. I'm looking to expand my broadcasting and basically get back up to speed to where I would expect to be if I were not in the process of moving. I'm sure you've all noticed the so-called sale of my life, the vanishing of my library, and that's been an interesting experience. I am now down to, I think, 11 boxes of books, which translates to 11 bookshelves, basically, versus the 10,000 volume library I formerly maintained. And this is a big change. But it really is a change in the world more than just a change in my library. As I was executing this change, as Sir Edward and I were executing this change, one of the thoughts for me was that for the most part, anything I could have found in this massive library, I can now find online. And in fact, was already doing so. For most of the last several years, the library has been mostly a backdrop for filming. There were certain books that had information that I don't think you can easily get online. Certain older books, certain more rare books, and those are among those 11 boxes that are coming with me. But if it wasn't unusual or rare, I really don't know that I need to take it forward. Hello to Mary in the chat room. Good to see you, Mary, and thank you for all the help you've given me. Mary has been a tremendous help in dealing with the library. On Friday, we took 18 boxes of books to Goodwill. So book lovers have had quite the couple of days at Goodwill now. I've also taken several sacks of clothing that no longer fits me. So some larger gentleman has had a lucky day as well. Yesterday, I took 3 sacks of shirts and vests that come nowhere near fitting me now and hopefully will never fit me again. And so it was time for them to go. And Mary says it was fun. Thank you, Mary. And, you know, there's still lots of things being done, but it's been an interesting process. I'm expecting to be settled in my new home around June 9th. So if you are in the Danville area and wish to come and say hello after that, should be fine. Hello to Ravenwolf in the chat room. Good to see you, Ravenwolf. Lots of things happening, lots of things being done, and it's good to have you with me on this this tour. And I'm thinking that during and after the move, depending on how things go, certainly after, I may try to give this a little bit more of the flavor of what's sometimes called a reality show, a little bit more of a look into my actual life rather than simply a presentation. Because my life will be simplified. It will no longer be moving at the pace it once moved, um, or at least I think. Um, and I have every plan to continue writing and teaching and doing artwork. Um, and I think that it will be quite the journey. And I'm glad to have you on it with me. So, what should we talk about today? I think one of the things to talk about is flexibility in life, because this change has required a lot of flexibility on my part that I might not have had a few years ago. One of the things about this change is it's the very tail end of my Saturn return, my second Saturn return. And after the first one, which, like most people's Saturn returns, was rather traumatic because I fought against it, I had resolved that whatever changes Saturn brought me this time, I would accept and go with, and it has made a world of difference. And I wish I'd realized that the first time. What a Saturn return does for you is it puts you where you're supposed to be, and often someplace you didn't realize you were supposed to be. It puts you in that position that your soul wishes to be in, to do the work your soul needs to do. And often we fight against this because we're trying to fight for what our mind wants, as opposed to what our soul wants. And Saturn will put you where the soul wants you to be. So as I go through this simplification of my life, this divestiture of so many things, I'm doing it with that in mind, that this is where I need to be spiritually. It's where I need to be for the next part of my life. And that going with it rather than fighting it is the policy I should pursue, and that's what I have done. As a younger man, I don't know if I could have done that, but I think, I was asked recently, probably on this broadcast, what advice I would have for a younger self. And I think this might be a piece of advice that I would have given my younger self, to be more flexible in this kind of thing. But I became first priest of the Correllian tradition at the age of 15. Part of that involved um, the promise to maintain all of these things for posterity. And all these years I did that, dragging them all over the country, spending thousands of dollars to maintain them, on the premise that they would go down to posterity. But when the time came for my life to end as it was, which it did on February 10th, it turned out posterity was not prepared to accept these things. And with that, I really felt that I had fulfilled my promise. I had brought them through the journey, but the destination was not there. So I asked myself, how do I pass them on when the people that I thought they were for are not prepared to take them? And I've passed them on, I think, to the people who truly wanted them, the people who will appreciate them. Particularly my mother's jewelry has gone to people who will appreciate it. In some cases, they'll wear it, which will give me great joy. And sometimes they will place it on their ancestor altars, which will also give me great joy. And I'm sure the ancestors as well. The fact that it's in people's hands as opposed to in boxes, I think is wonderful. Hello to Bradley in the chat room. Good to see you, Bradley. It's not what I expected to happen, and that's the important point. Sometimes what we expect is not the thing that needs to happen. And the more we go with it, the less we struggle. Or at least that's what it seems to me and what I'm experiencing in this great releasing. As I say, when I had my first Saturn return in my late 20s, I struggled against it. I knew where I was going, I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't at all what my higher self wanted, and how I was really meant to fulfill my vocation. So Spirit moved me to where I needed to be. And it was a difficult move. This could have been a very difficult move, this second Saturn return, but it has been somewhat I won't say it has not been difficult because I've gone with it. And Ravenwolf asks, do you find that you have a stronger bond with spirit forms after these changes? And yes, I think yes, although whether it's because of these changes or because of the experience on February 10th, I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg. But I do feel very much as though I have more than before one foot in the spirit world. Now, since I was very, very young, I have been, um, I guess we'd say, a medium, an oracle, a channeler, all those different words. And so I've had one foot in the spirit world pretty much my entire life, but much more so now. And I have not really talked about what I was told in that experience. But I will say a lot of it has shown up in previous lustration oracles, not all of it. Um, and I believe that these changes are partly to fulfill those things that I was told, but definitely I feel that I am much more in the realm of spirit versus the realm of matter than formerly. And I feel that far from slowing down, I'm going to be speeding up. And, for years now, I've taught theology um, and the skills of clergy. And I feel that I'm going to be teaching now much more the hands-on skills of the psychic and magical arts, and probably more widely than before. Um, and for reasons that will become clear. And I feel that our world is entering, well, it's already in a pivotal time. We all know that. And the ancestors have spoken about that for years. In the seat that I was in, I could not play the role I needed to play as these changes go forward. In the seat that I will be in, I will be able to. And if you ask me, am I saying that I know everything that's coming? Of course not. They never tell you everything. Or actually, let me rephrase that, because as I look back on my life, in a lot of ways, they told me more than I realized, but you don't always get it till you get it. And I definitely had a choice between whether to continue this life forward or to make an end of it by simply surrendering to that experience on February 10th. But it was made clear to me there is much more to do. And I've accepted that new challenge, which involves putting down a lot of the old ones because they have been fulfilled. I do not feel that in those changes occurring that anything has gone other than as it should have gone in terms of those promises to the ancestors. I feel I did fulfill them. And I feel, well, I know because they tell me the ancestors are quite happy with where things are going. At least insofar as you can be happy when in interesting times. And we are coming into interesting times. We see it all around us. We see it here in Florida very clearly. One of the reasons for going back to Illinois. And it's going to be very odd. This is the 20th anniversary of our move to Hoopeston. And I will be moving back to Danville 19 years and 11 months after that, which is a very interesting thing. And in some ways, quite unexpected. I knew it was going to be an eventful year. I wasn't quite expecting some of these events, but I see them increasingly clearly now. And going back to the town where I was born, to people that I grew up with, in its way is quite unexpected. Once I thought I'd never leave that town. Until I was an adult, I thought I was going to live my entire life in the ancestral home. travel, but move, no. But that has not been my life. And going back now is going to be interesting because everything is new. Um, and we shall see what that means. It it will be an adventure, and you will be on that adventure with me. And we will we will enjoy it as a group. So I want to check. And does anyone have any comments or questions going forward? It's going to be an interesting time. And so I say, it's going to be an expansion, more not a contraction. At least that is what everything is telling me. So I feel like I'm going to go back to focusing on my work as a psychic to a large extent. You know, I was a psychic for years and years and years, professionally, starting at an early age. In fact, one of the things I found, we'll probably post after the move, was my very first appearance in the newspaper as a psychic, or in a spiritual context from 1980 something. And it is very interesting to look back on that. And Ravenwolf says in the chat room, in the morning rune stream, we talked about fate and destiny. And I think it is very interesting as it mirrors what the reading was hours before you went on. And yes, that is very interesting. But, you know, synchronicity, it's one of those things that shows you that you are where you should be. Mary says, I'm very excited for the continuing window into your life. And that window is going to get larger. All my life, I've been a fairly private person, and I'm looking at, I guess, being less so. So expect more from me. And Anna says, yay, I'm a professional psychic and can't wait to hear more. And, you know, I think there's going to be a lot that I will be saying and teaching, doing, about the world of professional psychics. And, you know, I've often talked on this and other programs about what that life is like. And, you know, it's a constant hustle. Like really any self-employed situation. You're always mindful of what you're doing next. And there are so many aspects of it you might not think of. We've talked about how to deal, for example, with reading at a nightclub or a party where guests may be intoxicated. What does that do to a reading? And it does present challenges of its own, particularly depending on the reader, because you may find that an intoxicated client may make you feel intoxicated as well, because, of course, you're feeling their energy. We've talked about difficult questions. How do you deal with them? Difficult situations. How do you deal with them? And the simply annoying situations. But, you know, you also have to remember it's not necessarily the person's fault if they ask a question that makes your eyes roll back into your head, because they may never have experienced an actual psychic before. You know, one of the things that I remember as being very difficult in this way were teenagers asking when they would die. This is not a question easily answered in the first place. Generally not a question someone of that age is well advised to ask anyway, because so much can change. And really, for me, if I'm asked that question, in most circumstances, my answer will be to explain just how changeable it can be, what the variables are. Um, and then if there appears to be an answer that is likely, I'll give it in that context. But I would never say with a question like that, well, this must happen at this point. And the proof of that is myself. Because again, um, a reader could easily have told me, if I let people read for me, that I would die in February of 2023. And I did in a way. But here I am. So you have to be careful with that question. The other thing you have to remember, so many things you have to remember as a professional psychic, is that if a person has faith in their readings, sometimes they will make it come true even if you were not correct. And so with questions like that, you want to be careful. Um, and Peta from New Zealand says, hello, Peta. It's good to see you. Um, and again, so many interesting things about being a professional psychic. And, you know, in the world of the professional psychic, appearance is so important. And throughout my life, I put a heavy focus on appearance. And I think that was part of the reason. My upbringing was part of the reason. The fact that my mother left 400 pieces of jewelry should tell you that she was a person who put a lot of emphasis on appearance. Most of my family did. And so it's not surprising that I've spent my life that way. And this was only reinforced by my time as a professional psychic. And let me tell you, last night in my chat room on Patreon, we were talking about the world of the commercial artist, which I was also trained to be, and how, as a commercial artist, the first thing you learned was that you have only a few seconds to get someone's attention, and that this must be your first priority. And I've tried to follow that in all of the art and writing I have done, insofar as I can, and not always successfully, but I've never forgotten that. And this is also true as a professional psychic. At least if you're working psychic fairs, if you're a home psychic, then your advertising must do that. But if you're at a psychic fair, you yourself must grab their attention. A person walks into a psychic fair and they may see 20 psychics at their separate tables. And how they resonate with the people they see will usually determine who they will go to. Sometimes, of course, they'll choose based on literature. Sometimes they will be guided by the people running the fair, but often they will go by their first impression. Because of this, most professional psychics who work in that milieu have very striking table setups, pay close attention to what they wear, to make sure that they stand out. One of the people I most remember was Alexandria East, who was a very striking woman. She had beautiful snow white hair and very often dressed entirely in crimson with gold jewelry. And her tablecloth was crimson with brass items on it and gold confetti spread across it. And it made a very visually stunning impact, which did nothing to affect the quality of her readings, which were excellent. But it did do a lot to bring her clients who she could then show the excellence of her readings. My friend Novala, one of the best psychics I've ever known also, always paid close attention to how she presented herself. One of the interesting comments made about Novala by Sir Edward was that for the price of the ticket, she was your best friend for 10 minutes. And you could confide anything in her, and she would give you the psychic answers to those situations with sympathy and empathy. And that was very true. She was a very empathic, very generous and loving person, and this came across to people. And she was also a very glamorous person in how she presented herself as a reader. Rosemary Fletcher, who for a while, she, Novala, and I were the three musketeers of the fair circuit. Rosemary, who is, I think, hands down the best reader I have ever known, who could read virtually anything, came into the fair circuit as a button-down conservatively dressed person with a corporate background. And she had to learn to dress exotically for the fair. Um, but what she often did, she had fairly quirky clothing that she would wear to the fair, but it was her table, not her clothing, that caught people's attention. She made sure it had interesting items, all the different things she could read. She was primarily a palmist, but she also read cards, and you name it, she could and would do it. Another prominent person at that fair circuit was Robin Lochurko, who was known for her very, I don't know if you would call it a punk rock look, but it was a very edgy look, very glamorous. Often changed her hair color from one day to the next. And also one of those readers who could read almost anything, one of the best readers I've ever known. Amazing woman. But as professional psychics, that issue of getting people's attention while you might be reading for someone else and could not actually do anything was an issue that you might not think about until you've been there. And this is one of the things that, having this background, I have to teach the things you don't think about. Another very important thing that I was taught very early, in addition to things like don't cross your legs under the table because it will stop the energy from moving. When you're reading, you want to keep your feet more or less flat on the ground, because you will block if you cross. I've always found that to be effective, and obviously, when the situation arises that you do want to block the energy, that's one way to do it, in a physical way. Now, of course, there are also variations on this. I'm speaking generally. The other thing, though, is I was taught very early that whoever comes to you as a reader is meant to come to you as that reader and to get the experience that Spirit has arranged for them. Even if you may not think it was good, it's what was meant for them. And I found this on occasion over the years when people who I didn't necessarily think had been pleased with their reading turned out to be very pleased. Or people who perhaps thought their reading did not hit came back 6 months later to say, oh my God, I didn't expect that hit at all, and then it did. So when you're reading, don't second guess who Spirit sends to you for the most part. Now, sometimes you get someone who's just so difficult you can't deal with them, and you do have the right to say, no, I'm not going to deal with this nonsense. And Peta in the chat room says, I have been to many mediumship development classes and have worked at a psychic fair, and this is wonderful. I always tell people working at a psychic fair is the best training that you can get, especially if it's a big fair in inconvenient places. J&M fairs were often held sometimes in the middle of shopping malls with people going about their business, in busy convention centers, in sometimes outdoors on the sidewalk. The worst places imaginable to try to read for someone, which is also the best training imaginable to learn to read for someone. Because when you learn to do it there, you learn to do it everywhere. Because, it was really, we used to call ourselves trench psychics because we were working under those adverse circumstances, which gave us the skill to then work under any circumstances imaginable. And I can't recommend that too much. And with that, I see that we've come to the end of our half hour. I want to thank you for joining me, and continue to watch my adventures. I hope they certainly are going to continue. And watch as my office clears out, and we will go forward together. And let us, as we do each day, close with a prayer. And I want to thank you for joining me. And well, here we go. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to adjust to those changes that come to us and to make them into positive experiences. Help us to always see the opportunity and not the crisis, to see the growth that can come from the experience and to embrace that. Help us as we go forward to draw into our lives those things that make us richer emotionally, spiritually, and financially. Help us to have the fullest, most enjoyable lives that we can. And beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and with respect. And may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you with much love. I love meeting you here every day. I love all of you, and I love going forward with you. And until next time, may you be blessed be.